Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
And you got Luke.
Luke, we're tackling a tough topic, especially for those in the UK, I believe, and maybe all of Europe. Diesel versus gas engines.
I think it's pretty much a big deal, like everywhere except for the United States.
Okay, well, that shows how much research I did. No, I think you're right. Not a big deal here, but there is something that I want to get out there first and foremost before we start.
I can't wait. Go ahead.
It is gas or gasoline. It is not petrol.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of the stuff, like, because we're obviously doing diesel research, or like a lot of like the blogs and stuff I was seeing were like UK and Canadian and all these other countries, and they called petrol. And I was like, it's not petrol, it's gas or gasoline or I found that annoying.
I found it more than annoying. And I might take that hatred out on you, but I'm going to try and pass. Okay, Luke, let's get started with gas versus diesel. What do you say?
I think that's a good one. Before we do that, I have two fun facts for you, James.
Oh my goodness, I love fun facts.
The very first one is in 1876.
1876?
A cat by the name of Nicholas, and he spells it really funny. Nikolaus, Nicholas.
Oh, Nicholas, yes.
Augusta Otto patented the first four-stroke engine in Germany.
We've talked about this person before, I believe.
I know, we talked about him. And actually, whenever you like look up some of the process of how a four-stroke engine works, and I think you're going to talk about the strokes a little bit later on.
Yep.
It's called the Otto process. So I at least in some of the stuff I did.
I can't wait to have a process named after us.
I doubt that'll happen. Next fun fact, in 1890, so this was what is that, 10
not long, what, 14 years
14 years later. We talked about this cat before too. Our boy Rudolph Diesel, friend of the show, invented an efficient compression ignition, which we'll talk about what that is a little bit later on, that bears his name. So it's actually, it's funny that Otto just called it like a combustion engine or four-stroke engine, but diesel was a little more like self-centered, a little more self-serving, and actually called it a diesel engine. Like, it's not an auto engine.
I am on the record from past episodes that I am all about naming something after yourself.
Oh, for sure.
It is very selfless of you not to do so, and you don't have a big ego. Good for you. If I ever did anything of value, it would be named after me.
Yeah. The Herzing.
The Herzing engine, which would probably explode.
I'm sure.
Let's be honest.
It would be made out of Flaming Hot Doritos and something else.
and acid.
Yep.
Okay, moving on. The four-stroke engine is where I focused, I would dare say, all of my time, Luke, and the difference between them. And I may or may not have taken a Luke method of study where I watched a number of videos on the topic.
They're good.
They actually were really good. Some of them had nice drawings to help out. It was really useful.
It's a pretty complex topic.
It is. And the bad thing is, I'm a mechanical engineer. You do a fair amount of work around engines and how they work and the different processes and understanding really the equations like the change in volume and things like that. I don't remember a thing about it. So watching these videos was like net new James going back to college.
Yeah.
So there's that. Okay, four strokes in the engine. The intake, the compression, step 3, which is a little bit different for each of them. It's the power step. For diesel, the fuel is shot in. Pew! Pew! And for gas, this is where the spark would fire. And then after that, it's combusted and you push everything out. And that's the exhaust step. So you have your intake, your compression, your power, your exhaust. Those are the 4 steps in the 4-stroke engine, right? So
James, I have a small confession.
Uh-oh.
I was under the impression when I was a young child that a 4-stroke engine was a 4-cylinder engine, and a 6-cylinder engine was a 6-stroke engine, like it was pew, 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 pew. And like I assumed that the number of heads or
cylinder heads would
cylinders,
dictate
I assume
this.
the cylinders dictated the strokes, but the reality is if it's a four if it's a 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, they all do 4 strokes to do something.
Sure. Oh, that's reasonable. I think
I didn't know that. I thought.
No, I think that was very brave of you to open up to me like that and all of our listeners.
Thank you.
And I think it was a reasonable assumption for young Luke. We'll assume you were only, 35 at the time?
Yeah, about 35, 37.
But there's like 2-stroke engines, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's 2-stroke, and then there's the Mazda makes that rotary engine. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So big difference, in my view, at least, the big difference between the two is the gas engine uses the spark plug and the diesel engine relies on compression to make the magic happen. Does that seem reasonable to you?
It does. So a little bit more on the compression.
Oh, yeah.
So when you look at like a gasoline engine has a compression ratio of like 10-1. Roughly. Yep. I'm just kind of throwing that number out there. That's kind of the general area that it falls within.
You did 10-1.
Yeah, roughly 10-1. And this is a part of the difference between the compression has to do with the power of the engine. So a diesel engine runs at a much higher compression ratio, and it does that because whenever what the gas does, the gas pulls in air and it pulls in a liquid fuel mixture. It compresses it right before there's a compression ignition temperature. So it compresses it below self-ignition. Yeah, it compresses it below the self-ignition temperature because you don't want the gas and air to explode before the spark plug does it. So that's why the compression is lower, because if it was higher, it would actually combust from the ignition temperature. Where diesel, it actually creates so much pressure in the air that the air essentially superheats to this ignition temperature. And then there's this like flaming hot air, and then they just throw in the proper amount of diesel, like right at the right time. And then that's what, exactly. They throw in some flaming hot Doritos, and that's what makes a diesel engine run. Interestingly, though, watched a video. So when a gas car wants to go faster, when a gas engine wants to go faster, what happens is you press the pedal, and basically you're letting more air in, and you're adjusting the ratio, and you're flooding more gas in at the same time. Where a diesel engine, there isn't like that carburetor. Not the cars now, they have carburetors. I forget what the thing's called. The throttle body.
The throttle valve.
What a diesel engine does, it doesn't add any more air to the equation. It just adds more fuel more efficiently to the equation. And actually, diesel has a much higher ratio of air to diesel fuel mixture that it can work at. That's why it doesn't need more air. So it doesn't need to suck in more air like an engine does.
Yeah. Can I back up for a few to talk about this self-ignition temp thing? Just to make this crystal clear, in case people didn't pick up on it, that self-ignition temp is the temperature that the fuel mixture that is in there will combust based off of heat, like you were saying, that superheated air, basically, without the need of a spark plug. So big difference. Gas doesn't compress it like that. It needs that spark plug to light everything, which is a nice even burn. The diesel engine uses that compression, which I can get into a little bit later, but it's not exactly a nice even burn. There's going to be an explosion somewhere in the chamber, but we don't really know where it's going to start. So it's kind of like a more violent explosion that you have going on there. When you have the gas engine, you compress the mixture a little bit still, but it's not to the point that you exceed that amount of pressure that you need for the self-ignition temperature. So that's why you need this spark plug. Exactly like you said, though, 10-to-1 ratio. Diesels, what did you say, like 16
I think
or
it's like 16 or 18 or
yeah,
somewhere in that neighborhood.
it's somewhere around there, and it's all about raising the temperature. What's interesting is that the higher compression ratio means a more efficient cycle as well, which is one of the reasons that diesel has a better fuel economy. So that's always good, I suppose.
There's all kinds of reasons why diesel has better fuel economy, but that's definitely one of them.
Another one of those reasons, fun fact for you, Luke, is because diesel has more long chain hydrocarbons in it, meaning it has about 15% more energy by volume just naturally sitting there. So that just provides more energy than gasoline in general.
Yeah, I think they called it energy dense.
Energy dense. I like that.
Yeah, density. It actually has more. So if you take a gallon of one and a gallon of the other, you get 15% more out of the diesel.
Another reason they're usually more efficient is because diesels typically are turbocharged, which helps with the fuel efficiency. It also helps make neat noises as well when you're driving. Would you agree with that?
No. So
you can hear it spool up and stuff.
Yeah. And diesels are typically a little bit noisier, again, because the actual ignition is a little more violent. Like you mentioned, they tend to have that kind of rumbly sound. Like I always know whenever my neighbor's coming home.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, if the window's open or the window's closed, I can hear it. It sounds like a school bus is driving down my street. And I'm like, okay, Mike's home.
Right.
But it's gotten a lot better. So so trucks, I don't think they care about it. It's actually kind of like a badge of honor to have a super noisy diesel truck sometimes.
Yeah. Unlike us.
Do you remember, it was maybe last year, there was this thing called Rollin' Coal, which made no sense because vehicles aren't coal powered, but they had this thing called Rolling Coal. And what they would do is apparently, like on a big diesel, like, Ford F, 450, you could do something where I don't know if you floor it or whatever you do, and you would blow black smoke out of the back of the car or
Sounds
your
like what
stacks.
we need.
And they called it Rolling Coal. But there's cars nowadays that are diesel. We'll talk about the Volkswagen thing in a little bit. But there's cars that are diesel, and you can't tell the difference. They sound a little tingy a little bit. They sound like a little more like there's little people in there with hammers going tick, 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 tick.
There might be.
I'm pretty sure that's what's happening.
You mean like gnomes or something?
Like the little garden guys with the red hats.
Gnomes.
They're in there going tick, 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 tick.
David the gnome and Fox.
I'm fairly certain that's what's happening in there.
I think it's probably time we take a break for a word from our sponsor, Luke.
I have to assume that it's Shell or BP, British Petroleum, maybe Volkswagen.
Maybe Chevron. I know we have some close connections there, but no, it is none of them. In fact, we do not have a sponsor. Wah, wah, wah. Yeah, but we do have a shout out.
Who do we got?
This is a special shout out. It's a double banger here. This is to our friends Will and Jerry.
Oh, these are the cats we talked to yesterday.
Yeah, we just talked to these guys yesterday, I think. Well, nobody knows when we recorded this. So yeah, yesterday is perfect. Super good guys, really nice, really smart, way smarter than us. One's in senior year of high school. Yep. One's headed out to, I believe, Michigan State University.
Go
boo.
Mud Ducks.
Spartans. Boo. They're like a rival to my Penn State Nittany Lions.
They are. Okay.
So
jerk.
Boo them. But anyways, they've made some awesome changes to the way football helmets are designed. They're doing a mix of new technology, shape design kind of stuff, and materials that they're using. And they're seeing significantly improved reduction during impact.
Yeah, so, this is basically to reduce concussions from helmet to helmet impacts, that sort of thing.
Yeah, to reduce concussions. Really cool looking work. So good that they're a big part of a competition. I think nationwide competition that
like number 2. Didn't they come in second place?
They came in second place. They're getting like all expense paid trips. They're working with Amazon on stuff. They were going to meet Russell Wilson before the COVIDs happened. All sorts of good stuff for them. But what's really cool is it's so neat that Michigan State's actually allowing them to go into their labs to start doing physical testing on their prototypes. Cool. So cool things. Will, Jerry, super cool stuff.
Yep.
Keep up the great work, and we're going to be in touch here shortly. So if any of you have a cool story like that, you want to tell them that they're awesome, you want to tell us that we stink, whatever the case may be, why don't you email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com.
Make sure that you subscribe, make sure that you like, make sure that you share, give us some 5-star reviews. And as always, you can yell at your smart device and we will play Unprofessional Engineering right into your ear holes.
Ear holes. Love those 5-star reviews, but man, we just got a 3-star review not that long ago. Of course, Luke, why would it be? Is it because we're bad at engineering? We are, but that wasn't why.
Yeah, it's called
Is it
Unprofessional.
because I'm obnoxious? I am, but that wasn't why. Is it because we upset a Star Wars fanboy with our Star Wars episode? Of course it was. Because why wouldn't that be what set somebody off?
That's too funny.
All right, moving on. One more fun fact for you before you dig into anything. I wanted to talk about that compression ratio that we were talking about. That would be that 10 to 1, 16, 17 to 1 ratio. This is actually the ratio of the maximum and minimum volume in the cylinder. So if you're thinking about the cylinder head moving up and down, right? It's kind of changing the amount of volume in there. So for a 10 to 1 ratio, when the piston is at the lowest point, there's 10 times more volume in the cylinder than when the piston is at its highest point. So pretty simple to come up with your ratio.
Gotcha.
Okay, moving on, Luke.
Yeah, so I feel like, and we're kind of late to the party here talking about Volkswagen, but I feel like we have to talk about the Volkswagen diesel scandal just a little bit. I'm hoping to get a Volkswagen out of this. So if anybody's listening, works at Volkswagen, knows someone at Volkswagen, I would love like an Unprofessional Engineering branded VW.
Dude, if we could get that VW electric bus that Autodesk worked on with them.
Gracious, would that be nice? So one of the historical problems probably the reason why we say in the U.S. Gas is better than diesel, or at least the country has chosen gas over diesel, is primarily because diesel used to be really, really dirty.
Yeah.
And it wasn't as nearly clean burning as gas. Nowadays, in some cases, these super low, I forget what the acronym was, but these super low carbon diesel fuels actually are cleaner than gasoline in some cases. And we just kind of ignore that here in the United States. So what happened was, diesel starts getting better at being less, nasty, but still not perfect for U.S. EPA standards, because the U.S. EPA standards are the highest in the world. In other countries, they don't have the same standards. So,
are we the highest in the world?
I'm fairly certain we have the highest pollutant standard.
Maybe one of those European countries might be
what's
up
allowed
there
to go out the tailpipe.
Oh, I see.
I'm pretty sure we have the highest. And what Volkswagen was doing was they're so smart. Their engineers knew that when a car was getting an emissions test, like the car was like, it was like KIT. It was like the KIT from the 80s. The car was like, okay, I'm being emission tested now, so I'm going to burn at a different rate so that my output is lower, and it looks like I'm actually underneath the emissions. When it was not being tested, the computer would recalibrate and KIT would be like, okay, yeah, you can burn whatever you want and basically, throw dust and coal out the tailpipe if you want to.
And I call it was coal something.
Yeah, rolling coal.
Rolling coal.
Basically, VWs were rolling coal whenever they weren't being EPA tested. So the problem was, it was this major black eye for not just like Volkswagen, but diesel. So everybody has this really terrible misconception of diesel, when the reality is most diesel that you purchase nowadays, you roll up to Sheetz or whatever gas station of your choice, Wawa, and you don't like Wawa?
Take it back.
I like Wawas. Okay.
Sheetz for the win.
Okay. But most of that is really clean, if not as clean, close to as clean as gasoline whenever it burns. So yeah, and I feel like that's going to be a pretty big step back. I think a lot of people don't choose diesel because of that. They think it's dirtier. They think it's worse for the environment. So So yeah,
I feel like anyone that would have, say, purchased Volkswagen stock after it dropped from that scandal and then made money on it because of that is a bad person. That is not good behaviorally.
I feel like maybe you know someone that did that.
Good times. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting, though, that they would go and do that. What was the kit show? Knight Rider? Was that it?
Yeah. Of course it was Knight Rider.
I'm a lot younger than you. Remember that.
David Hasselhoff.
Oh, the Hoff. Gosh. Yeah, not my favorite Hoff show.
Germany's best export.
Of course he would have a Volkswagen. I know this is not all adding up. Okay, hey, I wanted to talk about throttle versus no throttle. I know you touched on that. So diesels don't usually have a throttle valve or a throttle body, like you mentioned. Correct. You have one in a gas engine because it changes how much power is being produced. So when you stomp on that gas loop, when you're just flooring it down the freeway, that's what you do. I've driven with you. You open up the valve, which allows more air into the engine, like you were saying. And the more air that you have, the more fuel that is then injected in, which of course results in more power.
Yep.
Can you do a Tim Allen grunt?
No, I don't do that. That's pretty good.
Thanks, man. It's high praise from you. Okay. Diesel, on the other hand, you manipulate how much fuel is injected in, not with the little throttle valve, right? Mm-hmm. And this controls how much power you have. As you inject in more fuel, like you were saying, you get more power, which makes more exhaust. If you have a turbo, this then spools up your turbo more, and the process continues. Some modern diesels, though, actually do have a valve, but what it's doing is controlling the pressure in the intake manifold. So this can increase the amount of exhaust gas circulation, and it also allows for a smoother shutdown of the engine. So instead of coming to like an abrupt stop, it kind of slows down the process as you're slowing down, and this is better for wear on the engine. So maybe another advantage to diesel.
So another cool thing about that is, again, watched a really good video. There's this, it's called Engineering Explained. I'll give them some shout outs. Nice. And the air fuel ratio is drastically different between the two of them. So
would you say that is the stoichiometric air fuel ratio?
Stoichiometric, you must have watched the exact same video.
No, I just know this stuff, man.
But essentially, gasoline operates between like 12 and 18 to 1 air fuel ratio. Anything above that, and it's too rich or it's too lean. It can go all the way down to 5 and maybe all the way up to 25 to 1 for gas. Diesel,
that high. Wow.
Yeah, diesel goes from somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 1 all the way up to 70 to 1.
Yeah,
so you can throw in so much diesel fuel with the same volume of gas, and that's how you get more power, because you got a bigger boom inside of the cylinder.
Do you know why that it can operate over such a large range?
I kind of stopped the video at that point, so I'm not sure what he said next.
I did not watch a video on this, but if I did, it would be because in a diesel engine, when the fuel's injected into it, there's kind of these pockets of fuel.
And they're at all different ratios.
Right. So they're at all different ratios. Therefore, a different temperature is going to be what sets them off. So the one that hits that temperature first, or hits that heat that ignites it first, explodes. And that's what sets off the rest of the reaction throughout the cylinder. Throughout the chamber.
Yes.
And so you don't know where it's going to happen. So it's, again, much more violent of an explosion than if you just have a spark plug with a gas mixture, because it's more set in stone what's going to happen. I wanted to get into a couple other things like engine braking and whatnot, but before we do, I think it's time we take a break for this week's Luke's Rant.
Yeah, so this one's it's more of
that good, huh?
It's not a rant, but this is more like it's a conundrum, James, is what I'm going to call it, a conundrum. I'm fairly certain that's a word. And I do this a lot. I do a ton of research before I buy anything or make any kind of choice, whether it's vacation, whether it's a vacation, a car, where I'm going to go to eat, whatever it is. And I'm not in the market necessarily for a new vehicle, but after doing all this diesel research. I'm fairly certain my next vehicle is going to be one of these turbo diesel, Chevy something. Chevy has a ton of them out there. Chevy seems to be one of the bigger people in the U.S. producing diesel vehicles across multiple, lines, whether it's trucks or cars. But I mean, it's crazy. So these things, diesel can sometimes be more expensive than gas. Usually they're the same or it's less, usually. So you're getting roughly 15% better efficiency. Diesel engines have fewer parts, so they're easier to work on. You're getting, lower end torque and initial acceleration. I mean, the only downside to new diesel engines, honestly, is they require a little more maintenance. So you got to change the oil a little more frequently. And like the whole glow plug thing that used to happen with old, and we'll talk about what a glow plug is in a minute. Most of that's gone away. It's not great for city driving, but it's really good for like long haul, long distance, where you can get, I mean, in some cases, these diesel cars are getting better efficiency than a hybrid. So I'm fairly certain my next truck may be some form of turbo diesel.
Okay.
Fairly certain.
I like that. I remember back in the day, this is kind of unrelated. Mike Smell, our good friend, longtime listener, probably doesn't listen.
He
it's
never
cool, Mike.
listens, I'm sure.
He used to drive a Volkswagen around. I don't know what it was, but I assume it was. I think it was turbocharged, and I assume it was a diesel. But it was like one of those real little ones for people to feel like they're driving real fast and, fast and furious around in, because, it's Mike. And it was nothing to do with gas and diesel, but man, watching like a 6'6", 6'7" dude
into a Golf.
Crawl out of the Golf. Yeah, it was just really one of the highlights of my life. So just to recap, your rant is you're going to buy a diesel truck.
Yeah, so it's a conundrum.
Not a rant.
Well, it's not really a rant. It's like, I'm not sure, because it's just like, they've been around forever. I mean, if you go to Europe, it's the exact opposite. Europe, it's like the percentage is crazy, all diesel.
Isn't diesel fuel more expensive than gasoline?
Here?
Yeah.
It varies. It's usually the same or a little bit less.
Oh, really?
They tax it differently, too.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay, so moving on, Luke.
Moving on.
Engine braking. You want me to talk about this?
Yeah, because I don't do anything on engine braking. I don't know what that is.
So for gas engines, when you let off the gas, the throttle valve closes. So we talked about how it opens up, lets more air in, more power, all that stuff. When you let off the gas, it starts to close again. And when the engine is on the intake stroke, that's the noise it makes.
It is.
Yep. And it's pulling in air, the valve blocks it and creates a vacuum. And this is what then slows down the vehicle.
Oh.
In a diesel engine, like for smaller vehicles, we'll say, there's a valve in the exhaust so that when you're pushing out the exhaust, there's actually back pressure, which is created, and the exhaust slows your vehicle down, which seems kind of creepy. Like, I feel like you're really, in both cases, you're really depending on this tiny little thing to control a lot of your safety, right? For larger engines, though, during the compression stroke, at the top of the stroke, the exhaust valve opens up and it lets out the exhaust. And that means that it isn't being used to push back down on the piston and push it back down. So that, again, reduces that power.
That's that engine braking?
Exactly.
That's that crazy loud noise you hear from...
super annoying.
You always see it in like really fancy neighborhoods, no engine braking.
Yes.
And that's that noise that semi-trucks make where it goes...
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. See, you knew about engine braking.
I did. I just had to play dumb.
Oh, you're good at that. Playing dumb.
Fun fact, James.
What do you got? Yeah, go ahead.
So diesel, I want to talk about the distillation process for a minute if you didn't have much else.
I did not look into this at all.
So distillation is the process of essentially boiling crude oil. More than boiling, it goes up to a much higher temperature, but it's basically increasing the temperature of crude oil to a point where that crude oil starts to turn into different vapors and different levels. And so you have this giant crude oil tank, you have this steam boiler, and inside of there's these pipes, and in the pipes is where the crude oil is because you don't want it to explode. And then what they do is they get this thing superheated and it goes into a distillation tank. And these distillation tanks are really, really tall. You see them at oil refineries. And essentially, different fuel basically finds its level. And then there's different pipes that come in, and they've got all these mechanisms inside of those distillation towers. And the very bottom is basically the residue. This is basically asphalt sits at the bottom. This is the really nasty, super thick, tarry type of stuff. And then what happens is it goes to, and it kind of makes sense if you think about it, then it goes to like waxes and lubricants. So that's the next kind of, viscosity. Then it goes to heavy fuel oil. Then it goes to things like petrol, fuel for vehicles, then diesel, then kerosene and jet fuel, and then like propane and butane. So this stuff is now air, or it's actually a gas. It's not a liquid at this point at the very top of the tanks. An interesting fun fact about diesel is because it's simpler to refine. So petrol requires, and I'm going to keep saying petrol for the rest of the show. Petrol requires more refinement and additional processes to turn it into gasoline, where diesel doesn't. Diesel isn't nearly as volatile as gasoline. And it's easier to transport. It's easier to store because it's like gasoline, like you can't be smoking around it or sparks and all that kind of stuff, where diesel doesn't have.
You can't smoke around it. Why?
Like gasoline, obviously.
I was kidding.
I know you were. So it's much easier to transport and store. So that's essentially a really high level look at that distillation process.
I think we talk about that a little bit in our natural gas and oil episode. Okay. Maybe a little bit, but not a lot. But check that one out.
Interestingly, though, the new like super clean, efficient diesel regulations that are happening, they actually require the same amount, if not more, refining to make the diesel fuel cleaner than gasoline. So it's not going to be there all the time where it takes less. So
a couple fun facts. Most of the stuff we've talked about, as you've been convinced to go buy a diesel, have been pro-diesel, but there are a few things that are advantages for gasoline engines. One is that you're going to notice that the diesels are much sturdier. They're going to be a much beefier engine, and therefore they're going to have bigger parts to hold them in place. Mm-hmm. That's because of the more violent explosion that you have. So they have to be stronger.
So it's kind of like I would be a diesel because I'm bigger and stronger, and you would be like a little 4-cylinder gas engine.
I would be like those things that you like would pull the little plastic tab out of and they spin for a little while and then die out. That would be me. Yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to put a mental picture together for our listeners.
That's fair. Someone just mentioned that they saw us on YouTube and we looked nothing like they imagined. So really? I assume it means we're a lot more handsome.
It has to be.
So whatever.
What else could they mean?
Another thing about gas engines is that they're less noisy. And again, this is because of that combustion process. Mm-hmm. It's much smoother because of the nice mixture in a gas engine. But in a diesel, the combustion takes place anywhere in the chamber, and it's really an uncontrolled process, or maybe like a semi-uncontrolled process. So they're much noisier, and that makes gas engines more ideal for lightweight applications as well. But the last thing I wanted to talk about is what happens if you put diesel in a gas engine or gas in a diesel engine, because this is a concern, I believe, especially if you're Luke's age and you've driven a gas engine vehicle your whole life and now you buy a diesel. But
I normally don't pick on family. My brother-in-law has 2 vehicles. He used to have 2 different vehicles. I think you told
me this before.
And he had a little, Volkswagen that was diesel, and he had a Subaru that was not diesel. He was on the PA Turnpike coming out to visit us. He's driving the diesel vehicle, and he rolls around. And supposedly the nozzles are different size, so whichever one fits into the other.
I think one's skinnier than the other.
Yeah, so whichever way one will fit into the other. However it worked, that's what he did. Filled this thing totally up, starts the car up. It goes like 10 feet because there's obviously fuel in the, the gas tank and in the lines and stuff. He doesn't even get out of the rest area and the car dies. And then all of a sudden he realizes, oh my goodness, I'm not driving, the Volkswagen.
That's so bad.
They had to like tow his vehicle, and there's no easy way to get this out. It's not like you just put like a hose down in there and like siphon out, because it gets into all the systems. And apparently it was a really difficult process to get the gas out of there. I mean, I don't know if you know what happens. I'm sure you'll tell us here in a second, but yeah, I know someone that did that.
That's crazy. That's so bad. So in a diesel, you put diesel in a gas engine, it won't fire. Just like you're saying, there's a little bit left in there, like in the lines and whatnot. So he probably started, got a few feet, and then stopped. But since everything we explained about the ratios and the compression and all that, if you put diesel in a gas engine, it's not as volatile, so it won't spark and initiate a combustion. Now, if you put gas in a diesel engine, this is when you have to really watch out, because instead of a relatively smooth combustion, you now get these detonations, kind of like, bombs. Like that's how they describe it. It's a detonation. It's so severe.
Wow.
And so this will, if you're lucky, eventually damage your engine. And if not, it could very quickly ruin it and, kind of blow it up. So for sure, don't put gas in a diesel engine, but you really don't want to put diesel in a gas engine as well. I'm sure to drain it all out of there and try and flush it through the system is no easy process.
I just saw a video on where some guy put SpaghettiOs in his gas tank of a car. It was like one of those like hidden camera things.
Gotcha.
He filled up his gas tank with SpaghettiOs, took it to a shop, and it's like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. And then they filmed the shop guy like looking at the SpaghettiOs.
That's
goodness gracious.
Awesome. Well, hopefully everybody learned just a ton about diesel versus gas engines. I think this is one of our... Apparently go by diesel. I'm sticking with gas.
I'm going to be rolling coal here next year.
Man, I can't wait to watch you roll coal.
I think that's what it's called.
If you enjoyed the episode, if you want to tell us we don't know what we're talking about, because that's probably the case.
Yes.
Or if you just want to say hi or request some stickers, how about you email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com. Until next time.
See ya.